Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safer Dave Show at SaferArizona.com, Arizona's cannabis legalization activist webcasting network. I'm your host, Dave Wisniewski. Today is Friday, November 13th, 2015, and we got a lot going on. We're going to give you updates on the campaigns to legalize cannabis in Arizona, and along with that, we got interviews with cannabis defense attorney Tom Dean, and he's going to go over a few key things, such as the 25-mile illusion. He's also going to touch on how cops are not obeying the law and they're arresting law-abiding citizens. And at the end, we're going to touch on the Glovebox lawyer. It's a piece of paper that you can keep with you in your glove compartment or in your house, and you present it to police officers when they're trying to mess with you, and a lot of times just having this piece of paper terminates the encounter entirely. So here's what's coming up. That's what's coming up. Stay tuned. This is the Safer Dave Show, and here we go. This segment of the Safer Dave Show is sponsored by 710cleaner.com. Is it time to clean the resin out of your glass? We'll do it in just minutes with 710 Cleaner. Find out more at 710cleaner.com. Again, that's 710cleaner.com. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dave Wisniewski with SaferArizona.com with a quick tutorial on how you can help us end cannabis prohibition in Arizona from your desktop, laptop, or your smartphone device. Check this out. What we're doing is we're trying to expand our broadcast footprint from our Facebook page, Safer Arizona Facebook page. It's facebook.com/SaferAZ. Now, what kind of helps a little bit is if you share our page on your feed. It does help a little bit, but to be honest, it does almost nothing to get more people to like your page and follow it. But what really helps, what is extremely effective, is if you go over here to the left, on the bottom where it says invite friends to like this page, you click that, and what it's going to do, it's going to populate an interface with all your friends, and you can go right down the list. Invite, invite, invite. Now, there is no invite all. You have to go one at a time, and it does take time. To be honest, I've spent days on this inviting lots of friends to lots of different pages, and if you see, they're all great because I've invited all 4,000 of my friends, and sometimes if you have that many friends, it'll take you like an hour or two to do this all. But please, please do this. This is what helps the most. So what we're asking is to go to that invite friends to like page, click them all down the list, invite all of your friends, and then over here we're at the bottom right where it says send invites, you click that, it'll send the invites to your friend, and that simple little task expands our footprint and does so much more than just sharing it on Facebook. So yes, please share it on Facebook, that does help, but this is where the money's at. This is where we get the gold, in the invite page. So come on, help us out and expand the SaferArizona.com footprint and help us reach more people. The more people that know about us, the better chances we have to end cannabis prohibition in Arizona. Thank you. Welcome back. This is the Safer Dave Show. I'm your host, Dave Wisniewski, and we're going to touch on a couple things real quick. One is there's a couple ways that we could change the law, legalize cannabis in Arizona. One of the ways we're doing is the ballot initiative. We've got two campaigns, the Marijuana Policy Project. They're an out-of-state corporate investor-driven initiative. They're sitting at about 110,000 of the 153,000 signatures needed to get an initiative on the ballot. So they're going to get their initiative on the ballot pretty soon. Then they're going to probably have some extra time at the end of their campaign for some promotions. And then there's the Citizens Initiative, Arizonans For Mindful Regulation. We're sitting here at about 30,000 signatures, so we still need a lot of work to do. We need more volunteers. We need people to step up so we can have an initiative with more consumer protections on the ballot so people get a choice of a really oppressive incremental regulation or an actual legalization that's going to save people's lives. Well, moving forward, there is another way that we could change the law here in Arizona, even before the 2016 election. It's through our own legislature. Our government here in Arizona is only 90 people. Those people are up for re-election every 2 years. See, a lot of times what's happening is no one's running against these people that are pushing these horrible laws through or maintaining prohibition. No one's running against them, and we keep getting stuck with these crummy laws. So we could run against these people, step up to be a representative. I think you just have to be 25 years old, and you can be a representative or try to be a representative in your own district, and then you can put in a bill as a representative and try to get that bill passed through our legislature, or we can just lobby our currently elected officials to putting in something that will legalize cannabis. So last year, Mark Cardenas, he was our representative who had put in a cannabis legalization bill through our legislature, but not everyone is on the same page over there. So sometimes our legislatures, they'll sit on a bill and just let it die, and it won't go anywhere. So that's why we really need to, have a show of force and let these elected officials know that we mean business. We need to legalize cannabis. So that's why the last 2 years and coming up here January, we're having a protest out in front of the Phoenix, Arizona Capitol building. That is 1700 West Washington, Phoenix, Arizona, January 11th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. This is the first day of the legislative session. Our elected officials can change laws within this legislative session. And so if you go out there on the first day, let them know that we're out there, we need to legalize cannabis. Let them know that this is on our minds, and then they'll be more inclined to push something, make it further. It might even pass. We may be able to end cannabis prohibition in 2016, even before the November election. So come on out, protest with us, stand for cannabis legalization against prohibition out in front of the Phoenix, Arizona Capitol building, Monday, January 11th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. 1700 West Washington, Phoenix, Arizona, 85007. Now, if you want to also get involved in the Arizona cannabis legalization movement in other ways and being part of the Arizonans For Mindful Regulation, there is a weekly meeting at Jerry's Restaurant, every Sunday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. It's 2323 East Thomas Road. You don't need a medical marijuana card. You just go, it's a restaurant. We're looking for new volunteers to come out. What we do is we train you guys on how to properly collect a signature, distribute the petitions, and then hopefully the next week you have them all filled out and we can return them in. They all do need to be notarized, but we usually do have a notary on site. So if you can't get to a notary, a lot of times we have notary out there at these meetings so we can get them notarized for you right there on the spot. But come on down to Jerry's Restaurant every Sunday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. A couple more things we got going on here. We'll be coming right back from a break, but when we do come back, we're going to go over Tom Dean, his 25-mile illusion. He's going to explain it in a little bit more detail, and then we're going to go over some industry reviews, seeing what's new, what's popping in the cannabis industry around town. So enjoy the break, and we'll be right back. This segment of the Safer Dave Show is sponsored by 710cleaner.com. Is it time to clean the resin out of your glass? We'll do it in just minutes with 710 Cleaner. Find out more at 710cleaner.com. Again, that's 710cleaner.com.
From the trenches, Tom Dean, attorney for cannabis. The 25-mile illusion.
Hi, this is Tom Dean, broadcasting to you from command headquarters here at attorneysforcannabis.com. Thanks for coming by today and listening to this broadcast. We have some important things that I'd like to talk to you about, developments in medical marijuana law, and some of the insider information that I have for you from the trenches of the cannabis prohibition and the war on cannabis users. Today, I'd like to start off by talking about some of the discussion we had previously about what's come to be known as the 25-mile illusion. The 25-mile illusion is the government's attempted interpretation of the Medical Marijuana Act to say that persons who live within 25 miles of a licensed dispensary are stripped of their right to cultivate marijuana for themselves. I believe that this was an invention on the part of the government. Last time, in our first segment on the 25-mile illusion, we talked about how the Department of Health Services had abused their rulemaking power to create and impose the 25-mile illusion on registered patients throughout the state. Today, I'd like to go a little bit deeper than that, because it turns out that the Department of Health Services did not invent the 25-mile rule, or the 25-mile illusion, more properly stated, but rather they borrowed another government body's interpretation of this 25-mile rule. And to recap very quickly, I'll tell you that if you listen to the first segment on this, you already know about these statutes, but just for those who might not have caught that, we're talking about Arizona Revised Statute, ARS, Section 362804.02D. And this is the statute that references a 25-mile limit, or it actually is a privilege that's bestowed upon patients who live more than 25 miles from a dispensary. That provision reads as follows. In applying for a medical marijuana card, the patient will include various information, including, subsection D, a statement signed by the qualifying patient pledging not to divert marijuana to anyone who is not allowed to possess marijuana pursuant to this chapter. Sorry, that's subsection D. I am actually wanting to read subsection F. Not subsection D, subsection F. Don't have my glasses on. A designation as to who will be allowed to cultivate marijuana plants for the qualifying patient's use if a registered nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary is not operating within 25 miles of the patient's home. So what does that mean? What they're saying is that a person who lives more than 25 miles from a dispensary obtains the additional privilege or right to designate someone to cultivate on their behalf. And why would this, I think this was a very good idea on the part of the Marijuana Policy Project, because what it does is it looks at, fundamentally, it's unfair to force someone to have to drive 25 miles to go to a dispensary. And at the same time, we can't expect that every patient out there is going to have a green thumb and is going to be able to grow their own marijuana at home. In fact, I would venture to say that well over 90% of patients don't have the technical know-how to do that and don't have the time or resources to attempt to do that. They're going to work, etc. Cultivating marijuana can be a very time-intensive endeavor, and it's depending on what stage of the grow that it is, it could require almost full-time attention and supervision. So what the MPP was attempting to do here was to say that, all right, if you live, first of all, the Medical Marijuana Act does not restrict the cultivation of marijuana anywhere. In other words, under the Medical Marijuana Act, there is no rule that says you're not allowed to grow marijuana if you live within 25 miles of a dispensary. In fact, the Medical Marijuana Act indicates that everybody is allowed to cultivate medical marijuana, every registered patient. It's only if the person lives more than 25 miles from a dispensary, if they want, so that they don't have to drive to a dispensary and they don't have to grow it on their own. In fairness, it allows them to designate another person to cultivate it for them. So I think actually a pretty good provision. I think the MPP in this instance had the foresight to include what would have been a very sensible privilege or additional right on the part of patients. Now, we talked about last time how the department then took that provision and twisted it and imposed a rule that would, instead of adding a privilege, takes away cultivation rights for everyone within 25 miles of a dispensary. Clearly not what that provision says. But they didn't come up with that idea on their own, as I indicated earlier. In fact, what happened was that when the MPP submitted their initiative to the Secretary of State's office, what happens is that there is a legislative committee that does an analysis of the initiative and puts together a summary. And then that summary is then included on the ballot for every voter to look at when they go to the polls to vote. And the Legislative Council is who did the initial twisting of that provision and invented this 25-mile illusion, stating that patients may not cultivate marijuana within 25 miles of a dispensary. Again, there is no authority for them to do that. And if anyone goes and takes a look at that statute for themselves, and very carefully read it over and over again, you'll see that there really isn't any way that statute, that provision could have justified the Legislative Council's interpretation. So what happened then was that the department adopted, in effect, the legislative committee's interpretation and formalized that 25-mile illusion, and that's what we've been dealing with ever since. Now, I think that what I'd like to emphasize here is not just that we had a government body, in this case a legislative council, in inventing this 25-mile rule. But when they did that, it was published, and the MPP had ample opportunity to correct that. In other words, they could have said, hey, sorry, Legislative Council, your interpretation of this 25-mile rule is incorrect, and here's how you should change it. But we don't see any objection whatsoever. Never was there any challenge to that interpretation on the part of the Marijuana Policy Project. And therefore, it was allowed to go forward to the voters and appeared as a summary of the Medical Marijuana Act on that November of 2010, election day 2010. So the question is, I think we should ask is, why didn't the MPP correct the Legislative Council's interpretation? Why didn't that happen? At this point, we're looking at, where's the MPP coming from, and what interests are they attempting to placate? Is it the interests of marijuana consumers? In this case, medical marijuana patients, persons with serious debilitating medical conditions. Is that who they're trying to protect, or is the MPP attempting to also protect the interests of other, as they would call them, stakeholders? That's not my term, that's the MPP's term, stakeholders, which they have indicated include law enforcement. So we know now that one of the greatest objections to law enforcement, by law enforcement, to the Medical Marijuana Act and also to the new recreational initiatives is home cultivation. And we know this is on record. This is on record, the MPP admitting that they were hesitant to include home cultivation because law enforcement didn't like it. And also the same can be said about defelonization of marijuana and post-conviction relief, so we can get people out of prison who have been sentenced to prison under the current draconian marijuana laws in the state of Arizona. So the reason why MPP is given for not including those types of provisions is that it would upset law enforcement. And I find that to be not a valid point at all. In fact, I don't see that law enforcement are stakeholders in this in any way, shape, or form. It's marijuana prohibition that's the problem, and we need to dismantle it completely. So fortunately, we were able to get the MPP to include a limited home cultivation provision in their initiative, which is regulate marijuana like alcohol. They didn't include these other provisions, so we're still going to see a lot of people going to prison over marijuana crimes in the future, even if their initiative passes. But but thankfully, we have a competing initiative called the AZFMR initiative, the Arizonans For Mindful Regulation, which goes much farther in protecting the interest of cannabis consumers, which in my view is what this initiative should be all about, and includes a more robust home cultivation provision, as well as a reform of the existing marijuana criminal laws, so that persons aren't going to prison for small, nonviolent marijuana offenses. And also importantly includes the post-conviction relief, so people who are currently in prison, if they would have been sentenced differently under the AZFMR initiative, will be eligible to be released from prison. But anyhow, this is just another example, my point being this 25-mile illusion of the MPP being complicit with the interests of basically the prison industrial complex and the people who would benefit from that. They are referred to as stakeholders, and the MPP has admitted that they are a very influential force in the drafting of their initiative. I would propose that the reason that the MPP did not correct the Legislative Council and did not object to the Department of Health Services, including the 25-mile illusion, which is a ripoff of every medical marijuana patient and more broadly every Arizona voter who wanted who voted for medical marijuana, but I would propose that the reason that has happened and that the 25-mile illusion was allowed to pass without objection is the same reason that the MPP didn't want home grow in the recreational initiative, is the same reason they didn't want defelonization and post-conviction relief, and that is that they are interested in placating law enforcement and other people who are tied into the prison industrial complex, who they consider to be stakeholders. What can we do about this? And I know I've gone a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I did want to kind of really give this a full vetting here so that you kind of understand what I believe that the forces are behind the 25-mile illusion. One thing I don't want to do is provide false hope. I have had, I know of other attorneys who have done that. And who have, I guess, indicated that they thought that the 25-mile rule, as it's called, could be done away with. I didn't agree with that. I'm not trying to get people to give me money to move forward with a lawsuit or anything like that. I want everyone to know that, after we did the first segment about the Department of Health Services imposition of the 25-mile illusion, we dug a little bit deeper, went back, pulled the original paperwork that was actually appeared in front of the voters, those handouts with the comments and the pros and cons and the legislative summary, and we were able to identify that in fact the 25-mile rule the 25-mile illusion had its genesis with the Legislative Council summary that the MPP elected not to object to, despite the fact that it was completely contrary to their own provision that they included in the Medical Marijuana Act. So while we can still fight this, I think it's important for people to know that it's a much more difficult battle because of that. Because now the government, because the MPP did not correct the 25-mile illusion at the beginning and allowed that summary to appear before the voters of Arizona, it makes the argument much more difficult, because now the state can say to the courts, hey, courts, we realize that the 25-mile rule is an illusion and it does not have any basis in any of the provisions of the Medical Marijuana Act. However, MPP had its opportunity to object to it. They failed to do so, and that summary is what went to the voters. And you all kind of can probably think of when you go in and vote on an initiative, lots of times the first thing you do is you look at the summary, especially an initiative that maybe you haven't been following really closely. You go and you look at that summary, and it tells you what it's all about. Now, this is a good example of why you should not rely on those summaries, and you should actually do the checking yourself on any initiative. But this is what the government's argument is going to be if we attempt to object to the 25-mile illusion at this point. Not that we can't do it, but it's a more difficult battle than we at first had thought. So I would still encourage, and I would salute those people who came forward after our first segment on the 25-mile illusion, who volunteered to be the card holders to be used to file a lawsuit against the government. I very much salute you, and I respect and appreciate your commitment to the medical marijuana community. Just so everyone knows, though, this is going to be an uphill battle, but the fault lies with the Marijuana Policy Project. Thanks for tuning in. I look forward to talking to you again about some of these more important issues as they develop from the trenches. This is Tom Dean, attorneysforcannabis.com.
That 25-mile illusion is some pretty heavy stuff. The way I understand it, reading the AMMA, it doesn't look like a restriction. You're seeing it, and it does look like just an additional comfort for the person living outside the 25 miles. The designated caregiver does not have the restriction until the legislator's opinion saying that they think that there's a restriction, and then the department was like, hey, we think there's a restriction too. So everyone's following this restriction, even though it was not written in the law. So that's quite the debacle, and it's very unfortunate that the Marijuana Policy Project didn't, butt heads with that and just let it slide, because it's putting a lot of people in jail, and it's hurting a lot of innocent people, sick people. It's targeting the sickest of the sickest, because the people who need the grow rights, the people who are desperate the most, are the ones who need it to save their lives. It's not, it's cool when recreational smokers get to grow their cannabis, but let's not forget that cannabis is medicine, and it's saving people's lives, and people need to be able to grow it so they can make that RSO, so they can make that hash oil, so they can make those concentrates and save their lives. Well, moving forward, we've got Tom Dean here again, going over how the cops aren't even following the law. They're completely breaking the law. And after that, we're going to go over a couple of cool things we've seen here in town. This segment of the Safer Dave Show is sponsored by Uncle Herb's Health Center in Payson, Arizona, where patients can get their edibles at wholesale price. Find out more information about Uncle Herb's Health Center dispensary at uncleherbshealthcenter.com. Again, that was uncleherbshealthcenter.com.
From the trenches, Tom Dean, attorney for cannabis. Bad cops.
Hi there, this is Tom Dean, attorneysforcannabis.com. Thanks for coming by. I'm broadcasting to you from the trenches, from the foxhole, with insider information important for all cannabis consumers in the state of Arizona, in particular, registered medical marijuana patients and caregivers. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a new phenomenon in law enforcement, what appears to be a new strategy or trend in law enforcement, in particular here in Maricopa County, but also in Apache County and probably elsewhere. This new policy on the part of law enforcement is an effort to dismantle the protections in the Medical Marijuana Act and is meant to, I think, basically deprive cardholders of their privileges and immunities as established in the Medical Marijuana Act. What am I talking about? What I'm talking about today is the trend now where law enforcement, and many of you probably are aware of this, are raiding caregiver grows throughout Maricopa County. How they get these search warrants is probably a topic for another day. In some cases, they flat out are lying. Law enforcement is going into the courts, and these judges don't really know much about the Medical Marijuana Act. They rely on law enforcement to tell them what's legal and what's not. And I'll give you one example. A case working on recently, the detective went to a magistrate and said, I have probable cause that there's a cannabis grow here in Phoenix, in Maricopa County, and it is illegal, Your Honor, for anyone to cultivate marijuana within 25 miles of a dispensary, which is obviously false. Caregivers are allowed to cultivate marijuana on behalf of their patients anywhere in Arizona, as long as their patients reside outside the 25-mile rule, what we've called the 25-mile illusion. So this is now taking the 25-mile illusion to a whole nother level and outright lying, perpetrating a fraud upon the court when law enforcement go to get a warrant and tell the judge it is illegal for anyone to grow marijuana within 25 miles of a dispensary. But in any event, that's perhaps a topic for another day. But today, what I'd like to talk to you about is once they get that search warrant, what's happening? They're going in and engaging in what I refer to as a raid first, ask questions later policy. They are going after caregiver grows that are 100% compliant with the Medical Marijuana Act, tearing them down, arresting the caregiver, and prosecuting him with felony marijuana production, and also alleging possession with intent to sell. And oftentimes, in almost every case, the individual is then subjected to mandatory imprisonment charges. This is because, and this is an important bit of information for all of you caregivers out there who are cultivating, any case involving more than 2 pounds of marijuana is subject to mandatory imprisonment under Arizona's current criminal code. So obviously the Medical Marijuana Act is meant to avoid those harsh consequences, but the kicker is that law enforcement has now decided that even if that caregiver is 100% compliant with the act, they will submit this as charges to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, who will then charge the individual, keep them in jail even while the case is pending, and subject them to mandatory imprisonment because, in their opinion, the caregiver, despite being fully compliant with the Medical Marijuana Act and being within plant count and within their allowable amount, is simply producing more marijuana than is necessary, and therefore are going to charge them with production of marijuana with the intent to sell it. That's what's going on lately. You want to be really careful if you're a caregiver. Simple compliance with the Medical Marijuana Act is no longer enough to guarantee your immunity. You must also be thinking in a much larger context, making sure that you don't give law enforcement the ability to mischaracterize your cultivation as something that is in any way intended to divert marijuana to the black market. In the next segment, in a future segment, we'll talk about certain steps that you can take to ensure or to minimize the likelihood that law enforcement would be able to do that. Until then, thanks for tuning in. This is Tom Dean, attorney for Cannabis.com.
That's right. Cops just completely ignoring that you can grow if you're a caregiver within the 25 miles as long as your patients reside outside of 25 miles. But they're going in and they're just raiding people thinking that they're doing it right under the books, but no one's challenging them. They need to be challenged. We need to let these guys know, hey, you're not following the AMMA. You're completely breaking the law, and you're throwing people in jail for no reason. These things need to be pushed back with litigation hardcore.
We had a couple of awesome things going on this week. We had the grand opening of THC Smoke Shop. I'm pretty sure it stands for the Higher Consciousness Smoke Shop. It's out there in Fountain Hills. Great area, beautiful drive. And they got a lot of awesome High Times gear. They got a lot of clothing, a lot of glassware, and a lot of books, a lot of cannabis education in that shop. So go over there, Fountain Hills, check them out, THC Smoke Shop. Give them a like on Facebook. We also had another awesome event this week. It was the grand opening of Mary Jane Smokeware's The Collab. It's an apparel store. They have a whole lot of different shirts, different kinds of clothing from a whole lot of different cannabis style clothing brands here in the Valley. They even carry the Safer Arizona Safer shirt if you want to go ahead and pick one up from The Collab out at 4801 East McDowell Road. That's the cross streets of McDowell and 48th Street. What we're going to do right now is we're going to touch on the last topic, which I think is a great topic. It is the Glovebox lawyer. This is a piece of paper that you keep in your glove box or you keep at your house, and whenever a cop comes up to you and tries to mess with you, tries to violate your rights, you hold out this piece of paper, you give it to the cop and say, read this before I say anything, and then he's going to read it and he's going to be like, oh, a lot of times this paper terminates the encounter with the police officer. What it does is it invokes your constitutional rights and refuses to waive them. But Tom's going to go into a little bit more detail, so here it is right now.
This segment of the Safer Dave Show is sponsored by Uncle Herb's Health Center in Payson, Arizona, where patients can get their edibles at wholesale price. Find out more information about Uncle Herb's Health Center dispensary at uncleherbshealthcenter.com. Again, that was uncleherbshealthcenter.com. From the trenches, Tom Dean, attorney for cannabis. Pulled over? Print your Glovebox lawyer today.
Hi everyone, this is Tom Dean coming to you from attorneysforcannabis.com, broadcasting to you cannabis consumers in general and medical marijuana card holders in particular. But today I'd like to address all of my friends out there who are cannabis consumers and give you a little bit of an overview of what's become affectionately known as the Glovebox lawyer. This is something that I've created way back when I was legal director at NORML back in, I believe it was 1998 that I put this together in its original form. It's still available through NORML. It's called the NORML Freedom Card from National NORML and other state chapters. But I have expanded on that, improved it, brought it up to date over the years since then, and I have it available for anyone who would like to print it out, and it comes in a one-page summary. Now, when I was legal director at NORML, there were other, I guess what would be called like Know Your Rights cards or pamphlets. The ACLU produced a good one, other organizations did. But what I noticed was, as a criminal defense lawyer, even then it had been several years, now 22 years of defending cannabis consumers, what I noticed is that a lot of times when people were confronted with law enforcement, they would either, their mind would go blank, or these law enforcement officers are trained in interrogation techniques, applying psychological pressure, and so forth. People would not effectively assert their constitutional rights, or they would simply not remember how to do it, even though they might have read one of these pamphlets or articles online. So what I realized is what we needed to do is reduce that to writing ahead of time for a person to sign and be able to simply hand that to the officer in writing, so that way the person didn't have to remember what to say. this has been highly effective over the course of the last almost 18 years now. I've had many people all over the United States tell me that just upon producing this document or a version of this document, it has had the effect of terminating any the law enforcement contact. Law enforcement oftentimes asks people to sign a waiver of constitutional rights. If they want to search your car, a lot of times they'll say, hey, would you sign this waiver of your constitutional rights? So if they can use a written form to waive constitutional rights, I realized we can use a written form to invoke those constitutional rights. So this document is meant to invoke your 4th, 5th, 6th Amendment rights effectively if you're confronted by law enforcement, and if there is anything that you would prefer the law enforcement not talk to you about, or if you don't want them searching through your personal belongings for any reason, this is a document that you can hand to them. And it's entitled Formal Invocation of My Constitutional Rights, and it is addressed to all law enforcement personnel. At the bottom, there's a spot for you to sign this. And I recommend that you do, and you put this in your glove box, and you keep it there near your registration, insurance, and so forth, and produce it in the event that it appears that a traffic stop is going sideways. In other words, if all of a sudden the officer is asking you about what's inside your car or asking you questions that you're not comfortable answering, then that would be the time that you would provide this form.
That Glovebox lawyer can be a lifesaver, and you can print yours. You can find the PDF file at SaferArizona.com. You can also check it out at AttorneysForCannabis.com. That's Tom Dean's website. And you can also find him on Facebook at Facebook.com/drugwarresistance. And before we let you go, I want to give a loud shout out to Arizona Cannabis Society Dispensary. They've been hosting the Arizonans For Mindful Regulation initiative. They've been helping out patients in need, helping save people's lives. They're a great dispensary, great staff. I recommend if you're in the El Mirage, Peoria area, check out Arizona Cannabis Society. Say hi, it's a great place. Until next time, this was the Safer Dave Show at SaferArizona.com, and have a great day.